Have you ever felt that? That relentless, um, quiet pressure,
Yeah.
that constant pull to stay glued to every decision, every little detail, because, the stakes just feel so high.
It's the feeling that if you let go, it all falls apart because you're the one who built it.
Exactly. You know how it needs to run, and the margin for error just feels, well, razor thin, so you hold on tight.
And that right there
Yeah.
is the silent killer of growth for almost every leader. We at this point where, if we're being really honest with ourselves, we realize that we are the single biggest bottleneck in our own success.
We've become a victim of our own competence.
Perfectly put.
And that is the absolute core of the paradox of control we are diving into today. It's this uncomfortable truth that the very instinct that drove you to excellence, that need for control, is the thing that will ultimately limit your impact.
We're all taught that control equals competence.
Right. But the research we've pulled together makes it so clear that that is a complete myth.
It is. The organizations that really, truly thrive today, they're not powered by one brilliant person at the center holding all the keys.
No.
They're powered by leaders who know how to multiply themselves. And multiplication, it only happens when you release influence.
So our mission today is to really unpack that tension, look at the psychological barriers that keep us grasping for control, and then walk you through some clear frameworks for empowering others.
To achieve, massive growth, both for the organization and for them personally.
Okay, so let's start with what you called the clenched fist, because our sources talk about this dangerous space, this safe middle, where leaders will delegate tasks.
Oh yeah, all day long.
But they never, ever delegate authority. They assign the work, but they don't transfer real ownership.
And think about the difference there. Delegating a task is saying, hey, can you compile these numbers for me? But delegating authority is saying, you own this quarterly report, the method, the presentation, everything. Your name is on it. Most leaders just stop at the first one.
And the price tag for staying in that safe middle is, it's just astronomical. Immediately, you create stagnation.
Absolutely. If you're the only one who can sign off on something or approve a budget.
The whole team's progress just stops when you get busy. It's a systemic choke point.
And you are guaranteed to burn out. You spend your day holding everything, approving all the tiny details, instead of doing the high-level thinking that only you can do.
You become the approval queue.
And everyone else is just waiting in line. You're the bottleneck you swore you would never be.
But the long-term cost is actually way worse, isn't it?
It's so much worse. Micromanagement is the quiet assassin of potential. When you don't trust people with outcomes, you're subtly telling them you don't believe in their creativity.
Or their judgment.
Or their judgment. You suppress innovation. Why would they go the extra mile if they know you're just going to overwrite their work anyway?
That's a deep hit to someone's confidence.
It is.
Yeah.
And in a world that is shifting faster than ever, holding on that tight isn't just exhausting. It's professionally dangerous. Well, organizations that centralize everything, they're just not agile. They fall behind because they lack the distributed intelligence to adapt. The leaders who thrive today, they stop trying to be the smartest person in the room.
And start unlocking the intelligence that's already sitting around them.
Exactly.
Okay, so that sets up the core insight of this whole deep dive perfectly, this necessary shift in perspective. Our research argues that trust isn't just a management tactic or some soft skill, it's a force multiplier.
It really is. It sparks innovation and strengthens confidence. But what's fascinating is the spiritual framing of delegation that a lot of the literature presents.
Right, it's not just a productivity hack.
No, it's an act of faith, of humility. The deep insight is that multiplication never happens through clenched fists. You can't plant a seed if your hand is closed. It emerges when leaders dare to open their hands.
And this idea has, it's got this incredibly deep historical blueprint. The source material takes us right back to the beginning, to the Genesis narrative.
Where God gives humanity shared dominion. He entrusts them to steward, to cultivate, to govern.
So that's the pattern. Delegation isn't a reaction to a problem. It's the divine intention from the very start.
And think about the risk in that. God consistently gives this huge responsibility to imperfect people. Noah, Abraham, Moses. The takeaway for leaders is that this entrustment, it's a means of transformation.
God doesn't wait for perfection.
No. He uses the responsibility itself to refine them.
That is a huge distinction for the modern workplace. We tend to hold back responsibility until someone is fully formed. We want the finished product.
Precisely. And when a leader does that, they're preventing that formation. They're stopping growth, not just limiting capacity. You're telling someone, you have to be perfect before you can even start learning.
But the learning is the job.
The learning is the job.
This is where it gets really interesting because you can connect that pattern directly to the radical leadership model of Jesus. He took this idea of entrusting imperfect people and just, ramped it up to an extreme.
To a wild degree, right? He delegated a global, world-changing mission to the 12, who were the definition of an unfinished product.
They were uneducated fishermen, tax collectors.
Inconsistent, often petty, confused. Peter was impulsive, Thomas doubted. James and John were literally arguing about who got the corner office while Jesus was still alive.
So if he had waited for the perfect resume, the mission would never have gotten off the ground.
And the principle is so counterintuitive. Trust before readiness. Waiting for flawless execution just stunts growth. It reinforces dependence on you, the leader.
The responsibility itself is the instrument.
That's it. When you give them the keys, they learn how to drive, sometimes by bumping the curb a few times.
Which leads right to this idea of exponential multiplication, which is so key for any organization that wants to grow. The sending out of the 70 in Luke 10.
A perfect case study in scaling through distribution. Sending out the 70 basically doubled their operational capacity overnight. It proved that authority is multiplied when you share it generously.
It created a system for growth that wasn't dependent on his singular presence.
Which is Resilience Planning 101.
And my favorite part of this whole model, he allowed failure to be formative. He let the disciples struggle.
Like when they couldn't heal the afflicted boy.
All right. He didn't swoop in and punish them or even fix it for them right away. He used it as a teaching tool. Failure wasn't punitive. It was pedagogy. It was part of the curriculum.
Now, think about that lesson in a corporate context. A junior manager fails at a presentation. The natural instinct is to take the project back, right?
Yeah.
Give it to a senior person to save the day.
Of course. And in doing that, you've just taught that junior manager two things. One, you're not trusted. And two, you won't be allowed to learn from taking a risk.
Exactly. The lesson of that struggle, what went wrong, what prep was missing, that is far more valuable than the presentation itself. Great leaders let that failure happen in a safe, contained way so the learning can actually take root.
But if the blueprint is so clear and the model is so effective, why is it so incredibly hard for us to do this? This brings us to the internal barriers. The fact that leaders resist delegation not from a lack of skill, but from fear, from pride.
And the deep illusion that control equals security.
That illusion is so powerful. We found 3 primary fears driving this need to control. The first is fear of failure.
Meaning, what if their mistake damages my reputation?
That immediately makes me think of the Saul archetype. Our research detailed. King Saul's entire leadership was defined by insecurity.
His fear of losing power, his refusal to trust David, who was competent and, divinely appointed.
It led to the complete erosion of his kingdom. He was so worried about being overshadowed that he destroyed his own foundation.
He put his own fragile ego ahead of his kingdom's security. And that leads to the second big barrier, the ego trap.
This is the dangerous belief that no one else can do it like I can. That feeling of indispensability.
I think we all secretly struggle with that one a bit. It feels good to be the person with the only key.
It does, but that feeling, it turns delegation from a strategic tool into a personal threat.
Your leadership shifts from stewardship managing what belongs to the mission to ownership, where you're hoarding influence to make the mission dependent on you.
And that's a path to isolation. And the third barrier is that we end up just tragically misjudging people.
How so?
We prioritize polish experience, age, a perfect resume over potential, faithfulness, teachability, initiative.
We look for someone who already looks and sounds like us just 5 years ago.
Exactly. And yet history constantly challenges that. David was the youngest shepherd, totally overlooked, chosen purely on potential. Timothy was a young leader who needed constant encouragement.
So when leaders choose control, they're substituting fear for faith, constraint for empowerment. They're operating against that fundamental rhythm of growth.
Okay, so that clarifies the why. We need to move past that internal struggle. We need practical frameworks. Because wise delegation isn't reckless, it's strategic investment.
It has to be structured.
So how do we start releasing control without setting people up for a total catastrophe?
We use a structured process. This is the gradual release model, and it's designed to develop leaders in stages, much like how Jesus trained the disciples.
A phased release of authority. Let's walk through these 5 phases because the details are so crucial. Phase 1 is the most controlled.
Phase 1 is demonstration. The leader says, I do it, you watch me. This is where you model not just a task, but the values, the thinking behind the decisions. The learner's only job is to observe.
Okay, then phase 2 is collaboration. We do it together.
This is joint execution. The learner starts taking on specific, low-risk pieces of the process, and you, the mentor, provide real-time feedback. You're both responsible, but the mentor still handles the critical final steps.
Now, phase 3, this is where the fear kicks in for the leader.
Oh, for sure. This is delegation with support. You do it while I observe. The mentee takes the lead. The mentor is present, but silent, acting only as a safety net.
Which means they're allowed to make small mistakes and solve them without you jumping in.
That requires incredible self-control from the leader. You have to watch them struggle for a second.
Because if you jumped in too soon, you short-circuit the whole process.
And the moment they realize they fixed it themselves, their confidence just skyrockets.
Okay, phase 4 is empowerment. You do it, bring me the results.
This is full autonomy within clear boundaries. The mentor steps back entirely from the process. The relationship changes from coworker to consultant. You're available for requested advice, not mandatory check-ins.
And the final phase, the ultimate goal, is ownership. You lead it, and you develop others.
And that's where the multiplication really kicks in. The person is now fully accountable, and their job includes mentoring the next generation, just like they were mentored. You've created a leader who is now a leader maker.
This whole model, though, it only works if you approach it strategically. So you need a kind of trust checklist. What are the key elements?
First, clarity. Seems obvious, but this is where leaders fail. You have to define the purpose, the expectations, and most importantly, the boundaries, what is not in their authority.
Right. If the boundaries are fuzzy, they'll just retreat back to depending on you.
If you don't define the sandbox, they won't play in it. Second is resources and authority. This is critical. You can't delegate responsibility without the resources to get it done.
So if you ask someone to own a marketing initiative but won't give them budget control,
You've delegated frustration, not ownership. You have to empower action, not just permit it.
that's such a common failure, giving the what without the how.
The third piece is coaching. This means staying present without controlling. Scheduled check-ins focused on strategy, not asking about minor details. The second you do that, you revert to phase 2.
And the final component, which is so often overlooked, encouragement.
You have to affirm their progress. When they hit snags, their trust in themselves will waver. Encouragement has to be specific, showing you see the character growth, not just the raw result.
So if we get this framework right, what's the ultimate payoff? It's not just, a shorter to-do list for us.
Not at all.
The payoff is organizational multiplication and just this incredible resilience. Let's look at that example from Acts 6.
A fantastic example.
The apostles, the senior leaders, they were overwhelmed by a logistical crisis distributing food to widows. Their mistake was doing administrative work instead of their core mission.
So the solution wasn't to work harder, it was to delegate. They chose 7 men, the deacons, to handle it. And the moment they did, 2 things happened.
1, the crisis was solved effectively.
And 2, they unleashed powerful new leaders like Stephen and Philip, which accelerated growth in a way centralized control never could have.
Freedom just encourages risk-taking and diverse thought. It's the engine of innovation. It deepened their bench.
And it builds tremendous resilience. Think about Moses intentionally preparing Joshua for decades. He didn't want the whole nation to collapse when he died.
He avoided that single point of failure fragility.
Which is what centralized control always creates. Organizations with deep leadership benches they're truly unstoppable.
And finally, it's just so transformative on a personal level. The act of trusting someone sends the most powerful message a leader can send. I believe you are capable.
And that belief, it awakens gifts and it shapes courage. Joshua's confidence wasn't just inherited, it was built, brick by brick, through Moses' active trust in him.
At the end of the day, the source material really forces us to see that leadership is measured not by the tasks you hold on to, but by the leaders you raise.
Letting go isn't a loss of power. It's a participation in that divine rhythm of growth and multiplication.
Which leads us to a pretty provocative final thought that came out of this research. If God's own design for the universe was built on delegation and shared dominion, if that is the fundamental rhythm of all creation, what fundamental divine principle are you opposing when you refuse to release control to the capable people around you?
That's a powerful challenge to our default settings. So consider that today. Identify one critical responsibility, one thing you've been hoarding, and try delegating it intentionally using that 5-phase model this month.
That's the 1-month challenge. Trust before readiness, and just watch your influence truly multiply.